Data protection is a top priority with today's work-from-home workforce. However, current data loss prevention tools inadequately protect data in cloud or SaaS offerings from insider threats. Secure Circle automatically protects data as it leaves SaaS services such as GitHub, AWS, and Salesforce. The protection is transparent to users and works with any application to persistently protect data, even source code. Secure your data with Secure Circle's Zero Trust Data Protection. Begin your 30-day free trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Secure Circle. You want to get the right things done for your security program. Sounds simple, but what are the right things for you? What does done mean? And how are you going to get there? Rapid7 realizes more than anyone how hard this can be. While Rapid7's Insight platform offers you industry-leading vulnerability management and detection and response solutions, their focus is on understanding where you are so that they can help you get where you're going. Visit securityweekly.com/Rapid7 to get started. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. We're ramping up our webcast and technical training schedule. In September, you can find out why traditional data security can't be zero trust and learn how to reduce the blast radius of your cloud infrastructure. Visit securityweekly.com/webcasts to see what's coming up. The next one is tomorrow, so make sure you go there and register and tune in tomorrow with Secure Circle. If you happen to miss it, you can go to securityweekly.com/on-demand. Jimmy Mesta is the Director of Security Research at Signal Sciences and a veteran application and infrastructure security leader with more than 15 years of experience. He joins us today to discuss securing enterprise digital transformations. Was the best title I could come up with, Jimmy. I know we got a few topics to hit. Folks can find out more at securityweekly.com/Signal Sciences. Jimmy, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Paul and crew. Happy to be back.
Yes, nice to have you back. We got a few different topics that we wanted to hit. First and foremost, the companies that we respectively work for have undergone an acquisition of some form, right? So congratulations all around to everyone.
To you. It's acquisition season, I think.
Apparently. So. Good stuff all around. Jimmy and I were comparing notes, and we're in a similar stage of integrating stuff, and things are going well, which is awesome. But it kind of begged the question of, when you have this M&A activity, how does that impact your applications, your security strategy? And there's a couple of different perspectives, right? I thought an interesting one was, if you're on an enterprise security team and your company has just acquired another company, how do you gain visibility into applications that you've never seen before, that could be on technology that you have no idea what the platform is? And I was like, well, that's actually a really good use case for Signal Sciences, because if I was in that role, that would be my recommendation to put it in there.
It's a perfect setup for a SigSci plug there, Paul. It's interesting. We're talking about what should we discuss this show, and it's like, mergers and acquisitions and even IPO sort of topics are top of mind for me, but they're very enterprise driven, right? If you work for a VC-backed company or any small startup, you got to get liquidity eventually. So you have to prepare from a security perspective on both sides, how to deal with those things. So it's been a really interesting journey for us, but yeah, it's Signal Sciences can certainly act as a bit of a stopgap when things are moving really fast. You just acquired 17 new web applications, and you don't know what's going on. You don't have time to go backwards and figure out every single AppSec best practice to put into place.
Right. And in the deployment options for me, is probably the first driver to look to Signal Sciences, right? Because you can work in proxy mode, you can work with the web server, you can work with the application inside the container. Having deployed it myself and looked at all the different options, that's what makes it attractive, because post-acquisition, you, again, may not know they could be running in a totally different cloud provider that you're not familiar with, right? But you need to get that visibility and security in.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me too, one of the most exciting pieces. We have our Cloud WAF product, right? So you can just kind of not install anything, point DNS to Signal Sciences, and we handle it, or we can integrate as a sidecar inside of Kubernetes, native Nginx modules, like you name it, we can meet you there. And I think that's good for legacy all the way up to the most cutting edge sort of web app. So it's pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm. I also think, go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, I mean, obviously when the merger and acquisition actually happens, there's a lot of work to be done. There's also a step before this, though, right? And that's due diligence. And having just gone through due diligence process, I know how time-consuming they can be. How could you leverage what Signal Sciences has in some of that tech due diligence as part of the process leading up to the merger and acquisition?
Yeah, that's a good point. If you're running Signal Sciences, obviously the acquirer will want to see that you have protected web applications or some form of air quotes IDS, IPS, and we can check that box. But also, we also operate as kind of a DevOps tool chain too, right? So it's not just security. You can actually glean a lot of insight into the amount of traffic hitting a certain web property, or even how well or how performant the application is, and that's all part of due diligence. Also, it's not all security. So 6i just gives us everybody visibility, and whether that's a third-party contractor or some consultant or the internal security team. So it's really useful for everybody. We used it in our due diligence as well.
I want also in acquisitions in enterprises today, right? Which just slightly segues us into a different topic potentially, but we were just talking about this basically in all segments on the show, that everyone's on a different stage of maturity with their applications. It's a matrix, right? Because you may have, let's say you have 12 applications. Those are all in a different stage of the journey, from being an older legacy-based application all the way through like a completely cloud native. We're running Kubernetes and the latest stuff, right? I think a lot fewer people are there, and a lot more people are on the legacy application side. And whether it's through acquisition or you're just a new AppSec person starting in an enterprise, you're probably going to have all of those different types of applications at different stages of the journey and everywhere in between. And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, totally. It is a journey, and it's something prior life was more consulting, training, helping with those digital transformations. And it's really easy to get caught up in the hype of Kubernetes, serverless, whatever the latest and greatest thing is. But you have to take a step back and realize that large companies aren't, like, containers are just becoming a thing, right? The comfort level is only just starting to get there with a lot of these technologies that, some of us call Kubernetes. There's certain versions of Kubernetes that are legacy, right? But that's not the case everywhere. And cloud native, to even bring it back to M&A is interesting, because if you do things right, we've been preaching this for a long time, you should be able to run your entire workload in GCP, AWS, on-prem with bare metal. Like, it shouldn't really matter based off of the infrastructure as code and all the things you have in place that kind of these cloud native technologies / infrastructure as service technologies have given us. So that's another benefit too. You can lift and shift with some work, but everybody's different. And honestly, like, the way we do things versus, our acquirer, or, everything, every acquisition you go through will have those challenges. But I think it's important to really sit down with your enterprise security team and figure out what are your requirements from regulation, compliance, whatever, and do the latest and greatest cloud native technologies. Do they meet those, right? Because they don't always. Moving fast does not always mean staying secure in that space, at least. It is a lot to wrap your head around. So,
yeah, I find it hard to wrap my brain around how security is done in some of the cloud native applications and instances, right? Like, sometimes it's just not there, or it's there in a very different format. How have you found that enterprise teams have been able to kind of adapt and have fewer security solutions, but still allow their teams to move forward and take advantage of cloud native capabilities?
Yeah, I've seen two different flavors, right? One is letting people do whatever they want, right? And that's kind of the promise of cloud native and Docker and Kubernetes and all these things, where you have this free to fail environment. everything can run on your local laptop and in the Kubernetes cluster. But as you talk to teams at very large companies, that's rarely the case, right? You have an infrastructure team that goes hand in hand with a cloud security org, and they build the guardrails and all the pipelines and machinery to actually give developers an experience that is kind of a one-way street. It's you have some flexibility in your configuration, but all of the back end has been built out to do the right thing inside of that cloud environment. So spinning up external load balancers, public IP addresses, using different secrets management is just a no-go at a lot of big companies from what I've seen. So, and you just give developers guardrails and let them write code.
Mm. Also with, legacy applications, we tend to think that we're all dealing with the latest and greatest vulnerabilities that are out there, but oftentimes we're still dealing with legacy older CVEs. Why is that, and how do we deal with that issue?
It's as an AppSec person, that's one. It can be painful, right? To have to go back in time years to have discussions about shell shock or some of these big CVEs that have happened a really long time ago. But as you kind of mature in your security offering, if you have a product, you will run into large enterprises that care about these things, right? They built something that makes them lots of money, possibly a long time ago, and the people who built it are gone. The server is, kind of running and nobody wants to touch it, and they don't, they balance that risk of keeping those things around, and you have to put things in place that are, it's tech debt, but it's you have to put stopgaps in place so you don't get totally owned, but you still have to deal with pretty old CVEs and pretty old tech stacks. I'm sure you've seen some as well. And
it's not all bad either, right? Because if you have an application that literally has been running for years and it hasn't been updated, but it's still running and making money for the business, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad software, right? Because it's still running, and if the team is left and it's still running, I think that's actually a testament to the quality of the software. It's just not taking advantage of newer mechanisms to keep things up to date and reduce the risk, right?
Yeah, and the medical industry, healthcare in general, you see a lot of these things, and even like banking to a degree, where they're kind of delicate systems. They don't have this clear path to just stay on the latest cutting edge version of every package. So you have to meet that company in the middle and provide protection that works and lets them move about with their business without having some random scanner or Shodan search lead to a huge issue for them.
Right.
Yeah, that's a huge part of what we do at Signal Sciences. I mean, it's all ends of the spectrum, right? We don't just work with companies running all the latest cloud native technologies. It's a lot of it's a huge mix.
Yeah, I think we like to think that everyone has the latest and greatest, either Python or React and using cloud native services, but Java is probably still one of the number one languages in use today, and probably where you spend some of your time, Jimmy, helping customers securing their enterprise Java apps, right?
Java apps all over the place every day. Yeah, it's there's deserialization attacks that we see that they've just been around the block, and they still cause a lot of damage. So I don't know the percentage, but I would say it's a large chunk of what we protect is Java or anything that's not the latest thing. It's not all React and Go for backend.
Right. Right. Do you find that people are containerizing their Java applications, or are they using other Java native things to achieve some of the same things?
Good question. I don't see a ton of Java, just personally running in infrastructures like Kubernetes with containers and things like that. That doesn't mean it's not there, but that's certainly not the most common use case. It's still kind of like VM centric, load balanced hardware running Java, and that's kind of that. So even with us, like we work in Kubernetes really well, but that's again like only some portion of what we protect. So we see a lot of people that still just have Nginx or Apache and kind of the traditional 3-tier web sort of infrastructure, and we sit perfectly right there as well.
What are the biggest drivers from development and maybe security perspective or not? Maybe it's a hindrance from moving from a traditional application infrastructure, as we talked about, into Kubernetes?
Yeah, it's $1 million question. Honestly, we've kind of ping-ponged around this over the past few years, where like everyone 5 years ago is like microservices, rah, like everything has to be a microservice. Everything has to be in a Docker image in a container, and it's helpful, right? Because when you have Docker, you can run things on your machine as a developer and have a really good kind of CI/CD build pipeline to get this artifact that gets eventually shipped to a Kubernetes cluster or an orchestration system of choice. But the drivers, I hope, are speed, agility, and developer effectiveness. And I don't think the drive is security per se. We can do security in that pipeline. That's a whole different discussion. But I think it's the ability to move fast, release frequently, and enable DevOps tool chains and pipelines that are effective. So that's the hope. But we also have seen kind of a messy situation with a lot of very distributed systems, right? Like now we have service mesh layers on top of Kubernetes, multiple APIs in the Kubernetes ecosystem. Applications are becoming so decoupled that there's not one source of domain knowledge internally, and people are even starting to scale back. Like, I don't want 450 microservices. Maybe like 12 will do,
right?
Because you start running into these problems we never had before when everything has to talk over a network to get things done.
Matt.
Yeah, the promise a little bit was the ability to scale the app, right? Instead of having one big monolithic piece of code, you could break it up into subsets, have different teams work on it, and kind of parallelize development and speed up, right? But to your point, sometimes you can go too far, right? You could take a 3-tier architecture and turn it into 450 pieces, and now it's no longer manageable.
Yeah, the scale thing, I didn't bring that up. That's super important also, right? That's the promise. It's like, well, I want to scale these 3 microservices during a bursty workload or whatever. And that sounds great in theory, and that works really well in Kubernetes or other container management systems. But you also have to remember that our compute power that we have now too, in just a regular VM or auto scaling groups, they can keep up with things also in an automated way. It's not as elegant, but it might be what you need. You might not need the whole enchilada that is a container management system. So you just proceed with caution, make decisions thoughtfully when you start tearing things up into microservices, because it's hard to go back.
Paul, you probably know that a little bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you do. You can shoot yourself in the foot if you make things too complicated, right? And rather than allowing you to move faster and be more secure, it actually slows you down and introduces more security vulnerabilities, right?
It can, yeah. I mean, it's amazing the layers of abstraction we have somehow introduced to our world. Like just the service mesh discussion of what do we need this? Why do we need this? I guess I need this. Like, and then you turn all these things on, and all of a sudden you're in a situation where the amount of people that know what's going on at a deep level inside of the infrastructure, it shrinks or it's close to zero. So you're at the whim of some open source maintainer, and we don't know what that will lead to from a security perspective fully.
Yep.
Yeah, or a performance issue. I mean, think about throwing sidecars out there all over the place with your service mesh. I mean, that also adds some overhead. So it also has potentially a performance impact. Do you need to go to full-blown service mesh for your application? I don't know that it's justifiable in every case at all.
You better have a lot of good reasons before you go into the full sidecar Istio sort of world, right? I mean, personally, I think things like Linkerd and some of the open service mesh initiatives where you operate on the node versus the sidecar, they might offer more value with less impact, but still, like, most people turn on Istio because they need MTLS because an auditor told them you don't have MTLS. So they've just introduced one of the most complicated projects right now going on in cloud native into their environment and might not understand all the ramifications of that.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy, for those out there that are in the process of migrating legacy applications, what advice do you have for them to ease their journey, based on what we discussed so far, and how to apply security, from that journey from a legacy application, maybe all the way into cloud native? How do we maintain security and visibility in that journey?
Yeah, that's great. A few tips, right? Like, get visibility where you can. This is kind of where the sidecar model helps. If you decide to lift and shift a legacy application, jam it into a Docker container, run it on Kubernetes, you're at least going to want the metrics and some of the logging capabilities to see, like, even just performance wise, like, is this thing working? So make sure you have visibility. Obviously, things like Datadog all play really nice in that world. Mm-hmm. And, even at a higher level, deciding whether lift and shift is the right way to do it, right? Like, if you have the opportunity, you can start decoupling MySQL and putting it into some cloud managed database, or getting things sorted out that, don't make it look like a one-to-one match in the cloud native environment. So that requires a refactor, that requires more work, but down the road might pay off. If you deal with compliance, which most of us do in some capacity, make sure that you're following all, the regulations, guidelines, et cetera. PCI, whatnot, are going to require different things versus your bare metal on-prem hardware. And staff up, right? Like, cloud security architect, engineer people exist, but are not going to be hireable within the 3 weeks that you need them. So prepare to get somebody, maybe even that's a third party, to come in and help with that transition to make sure you didn't miss something terrible, right? One misconfiguration, as most of us know on this call, in AWS, you might not even do it on purpose, right? It could just lead to some serious downstream effects. So you want to make sure that you're testing things along the way. And, watch the CNCF landscape. Like, there's this whole Twitter thing going on with the CNCF landscape image. Everyone's like, what is this? Like, this is ridiculous. But there are projects on there that are security oriented, right? gvisor, Kata containers, and those might help you add additional layers of security at the Linux kernel level as well. So there are tools out there that play really nice. You just have to know what to turn on and how to use them.
Yeah, having said that, Jimmy, do you have training resources for folks? Because I find that when you're looking at even not so much of a legacy application, right, may not even be that old, but you're on this progression of putting it in containers, moving to Kubernetes, pushing into the cloud, you just always got new things to learn. I guess we've always had that in our industry, right? But I feel like it's been multiplied by 1,000 with all of the different cloud technologies. I can't keep the AWS services straight in my head. I'm like, wait, what is that one and what does it do again? Are there good training resources out there for people on this journey?
Yeah, so there are. From a security perspective, it's hard to get better than Scott Piper's flaws.cloud site. I think that's it. Or is it?
We're all typing now.
Yeah, flaws.cloud. He has 2 versions of it. He's the AWS security independent security voice. It doesn't work for AWS, but this is a really cool little series of exercises that will help you kind of go through what a vulnerable AWS environment looks like and how to fix it. Really great. It's just the Summit Route blog that he maintains. He's at the latest leading edge of this stuff, and that's not formal training, but he also does get formal training as well. So you can sign up for that at various conferences and things. My ex kind of employer that I worked a lot with, Jim Manico over at Manicode Security. He's got a whole suite of trainings, cloud, like AppSec, all those things. Those are more formal style trainings. And there are a few intentionally vulnerable Kubernetes apps popping up. I was just trying to find one that I ran into from Madhu Akula, Madhu Akula. He wrote Kubernetes Goat. I wrote one in the past. Don't use that one. Just use his. Gotcha. Much more full featured than mine. So he has Kubernetes Goat. That is basically an intentionally vulnerable Kubernetes environment that has all sorts of, kind of like the Rails Goat thing. We've seen the Goat projects all over the place. So that's some good stuff. And then you can hit me up on Twitter or wherever, and I'll point you, if I don't have the answer, which I probably will not, I can point you in the right direction as well.
Outstanding. Any recent announcements or things happening at Signal Sciences? I know you're in the process of integration and recently acquired. As we've found, that tends to be your focus, right? Is making sure things are getting integrated. But product announcements or enhancements, features, anything you want to tell our audience about?
We have a recent integration with Azure App Service that's really cool. Again, testament to like our push to meet people where they are in any cloud environment. So that's kind of Azure's application stack PaaS sort of solution, Heroku style implementation, and we integrate with that. That was kind of a recent announcement, and we were acquired, so that's probably the biggest announcement, and there'll be more to come. I don't know anything other than that at this point, so it's exciting. We're going to be doing some really cool stuff in the future. I think it's a really good home for us.
And you were acquired by Fastly, correct?
Yeah.
And just for our audience, what is Fastly and some things you might have learned about their products?
It's CDN, edge compute sort of delivery model. So they have fast, amazing servers all over the world that give people, all of the content very quickly that they need. So you could think something kind of like in the Akamai Cloudflare space. And gotcha. Fastly does that. And 6i is going to be the security play there.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think the interesting part of the acquisition is integrating some of the security capabilities that Signal Sciences bring into the CDNs to continue to grow that business. I think it'll be very interesting to watch what kind of transpires with the acquisition.
I think it's going to be an amazing area of growth. So it'll be a lot of fun to work with a team like Fastly.
Awesome. Well, for folks that want to learn more, you can visit securityweekly.com/Signal Sciences. Jimmy, thank you very much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
With that will conclude this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. See you next time.